Hollywood got exactly what they asked for. For months, the loudest voices in the industry were begging, lobbying, letter writing, showing up to Senate hearings to make sure Netflix didn't buy Warner Brothers Discovery. James Cameron wrote a letter to Congress. Theater owners hired lobbyists. Guilds held press conferences. The whole town basically formed a Paramount fan club. And then Paramount won. And now, the same people are calling it a jobs apocalypse, the most anti-competitive merger in Hollywood history, a disaster. Hollywood asked for this. Hollywood campaigned for this. And now that they have it, they realize something really important. They've picked the wrong devil. Welcome back to The Critical Nerd, the channel where we cover Hollywood media, box office, corporate chaos, and all the beautiful executive nonsense they keep serving us like it's prestige content. If you're new here, this is what we do. We take the spin, strip out the PR, and look at the money, the politics, the power plays, and the panic underneath it. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Because this Paramount-Warner story is turning into one of the best examples of Hollywood saying, please save us from this terrible outcome, only to get exactly what they asked for and immediately go, oh no, we've made a huge mistake. Let's start with why Hollywood was so hostile to Netflix in the first place. Because, think about it, this part makes sense. Netflix has spent years giving the industry every reason to distrust it when it comes to theatrical movies. Ted Sarandos has never exactly come off like a guy who wakes up in the morning and says, how do I preserve the magic of the cinematic experience? No. The vibe has always been, why are we wasting money on theaters when people could just sit in sweatpants and let the next episode autoplay? And for exhibitors, filmmakers, and everyone tied to the theatrical ecosystem, that was the nightmare. Because if Netflix owns Warner Brothers, now you're not just talking about a streamer licensing movies. Now you're talking about a company that already dominates streaming suddenly controlling Batman, DC, HBO, Warner Brothers Film and TV, and one of the deepest libraries in the business. That's when the fear goes from theoretical to existential. The argument from Hollywood was pretty simple. Netflix doesn't just want control. Netflix wants control. Control over distribution, control over windows, control over audience behavior, control over how quickly the theatrical business gets pushed further toward irrelevance. And that's why people like James Cameron came out swinging. Because to a lot of the old school Hollywood, well, Netflix just wasn't another bidder. It was the symbol of the industry's entire identity crisis. The anti-Netflix case was basically, if Netflix gets Warner, theatrical becomes optional. And once that happens, good luck putting the toothpaste back in the tube. That was the fear. And honestly, it wasn't irrational. So if Netflix was the villain, who got cast as the savior? That'd be Paramount. Or more accurately, Paramount got cast as the option that wasn't Netflix. And that's an important distinction, because I don't think Hollywood was ever deeply in love with Paramount. I think they were just more terrified of Netflix. Paramount, and especially David Ellison's side of this thing, knew exactly how to position this bid. They leaned hard into the idea that they were the pro-theatrical, pro-legacy Hollywood, pro-studio option. They've talked about maintaining theatrical output. They talked about stronger commitment to the big screen. They talked about releasing 30 films a year theatrically, which was basically the corporate version of looking Hollywood dead in the eye and saying, see, we love movies in real theaters with real popcorn. We're one of you guys. And for a while, that messaging worked. Because compared to Netflix, Paramount felt familiar. Legacy studio, traditional distribution, a company that at least understood the value of theatrical, even if nobody in Hollywood fully trusted the boardroom jargon. So for a minute, Paramount got to play the white knight, the grown-up alternative, the industry-friendly choice, the save Warner from Silicon Valley option. And this is where the story gets funny, because Hollywood basically said, please, anybody but Netflix. And Paramount said, wonderful. Be careful what you wish for. Because once Paramount actually won, everything changed. When Netflix was still in the picture, Paramount got to exist as an idea, a counterweight, a symbolic alternative, a shield against streamer domination. But once Paramount became the actual winner, the industry had to stop fantasizing and start doing math. And that math is ugly. Suddenly, people weren't asking, will Paramount protect theaters? They were asking, how in the hell do you pay for this? Because now you're looking at massive debt, massive overlap, massive synergy promises. And in corporate merger language, synergy is one of those words that sounds clean and strategic and visionary. But in real life, it usually means, congratulations, half this floor is getting fired. That's when the mood started flipping, because a Warner-Netflix combination had one type of risk, streaming dominance. But a Paramount-Warner combination had another. Two giant legacy media companies smashing together while executives promised billions in savings. And when executives promise billions in savings, they're not talking about finding a coupon code. They're talking about cuts. They're talking about duplication. They're talking about departments getting merged, teams getting eliminated, projects getting shelved, and workers getting crushed so the PowerPoint can look efficient. That is when Hollywood started realizing, oh, this isn't salvation. This is just a different apocalypse with better theatrical branding. And this is really the heart of the video. Why did people flip? Because once Paramount won, the downside became obvious. First, you have the debt bomb. This isn't some neat, elegant transaction. This is a giant, debt-heavy mega merger with enormous financial pressure attached to it. And when Wall Street starts looking at leverage, downgrades, commitments, and cost-saving targets, Hollywood hears one thing. Pain is coming. Because debt on that level doesn't just sit there politely. It demands sacrifice. And the sacrifices are almost never made by the people in the corner office. Second, you've got layoffs. Those layoffs feel inevitable. This is not Netflix buying a studio that works differently from its own business. This is a Paramount-Warner. Two giant legacy operations with overlapping assets, overlapping divisions, overlapping distribution, overlapping corporate lawyers, overlapping streaming ambitions, overlapping news baggage, overlapping everything. That means redundancy, and redundancy means pink slips. A lot of them. That's why the vibe changed so fast, because people started realizing that even if Netflix scared Hollywood culturally, Paramount might hit Hollywood harder structurally. And that's the twist. The industry may have stopped the streaming boogeyman, only to invite in the downsizing boogeyman. Third, the WGA and labor side never really bought the fairy tale. And this part matters, because one of the biggest mistakes people make in talking about the story is acting like Hollywood as a whole was on Team Paramount. Not so fast, my friends. Some factions were anti-Netflix. Some exhibitors preferred Paramount to Netflix. Some creatives liked the theatrical talk. But labor? The writers? A lot of people worried about consolidation no matter who won. Because whether it's Netflix Warner or Paramount Warner, the result is still fewer buyers, more concentration, less competition, and more leverage in fewer hands. And that is terrible for the people who actually make the stuff. Fourth, theater owners still aren't exactly thrilled. And this is another important correction. Theater owners didn't suddenly throw a parade and say, hooray, Paramount won, problem solved. No. The concern just changed. Instead of worrying about Netflix shrinking the theatrical pipeline because of its streaming model, now they worry about one combined studio controlling an enormous slice of the box office. So it becomes a different kind of concentration problem. Less streaming kills theaters, more great. Now, one company has even more leverage over what gets released, when it gets released, and how much of the calendar it controls. Again, same panic, different villain. And fifth, CNN, CBS, and the political baggage made this even messier. Yeah, And here's where the backlash gets louder. Because now we're not just talking about movies and shows. Now we're talking about newsrooms, CNN, CBS News, editorial control, corporate influence, political optics. And the second that part became more central to the story, this stopped being just another Hollywood merger. Now it had ideological heat. Now it had media world panic. Now it had left-leaning Hollywood asking questions about what kind of influence, leadership, or political pressure might come with the new structure. So even for people who are okay with Paramount as a studio argument, the broader merger started looking messier, riskier, and far more radioactive. And that makes public backlash much louder than it would have been if this were just about movie release schedules. So in the end, that's the real story. Hollywood didn't suddenly become pro-Netflix. Hollywood didn't wake up and decide Ted Sarandos was misunderstood. What happened is much simpler. When Netflix was the threat, the fear was, they'll kill theaters. When Paramount won, the fear became, they'll gut the town to pay for the deal. That's the switch. That's why the mood changed. That's why the rhetoric changed. That's why this whole saga feels like one giant lesson in unintended consequences. Hollywood thought it was choosing the lesser evil. Instead, it may have just picked the evil with better press releases. And now the people who wanted Paramount to beat Netflix are staring at the debt, the overlap, the layoffs, the labor backlash, the newsroom fears, and the consolidation risk and realizing, maybe we didn't win anything at all. Maybe we just changed the logo on the disaster. But let me know what you think. Was Paramount actually the better outcome? Or is Hollywood now realizing it stopped one nightmare just to speed run into another one? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, if you would, smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with somebody who still thinks studio mergers are about synergy and not corporate Hunger Games. And as always, low expectations, high receipts. I'm the Critical Nerd, and I will see you in the next one.